Hi everybody, and thanks for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial on the Scud Nymph. If you're anything like me, you probably love fishing spring creeks for trout. Or if you're anything like me, you probably don't fish them enough but wish you could fish them more often. Well, I'll tell you that whenever I do fish those spring creeks, my number one fish catching fly is always some form of a scud, most notably when I'm nymphing. Scuds are absolutely prolific in spring creeks, and you may have also commonly heard them called crustaceans or shrimp, but for the purposes of this video, we're just going to call them scuds. Well, a few things that I've learned over the years is that though I really am knowledgeable on the mayfly and caddis life cycles, I'm not so much on the scud life cycle. But I do know that whenever scuds are swimming in the water, they're not always curved, yet whenever we buy these scud hooks, they're always curved. So for starters, I'm going to be tying this pattern today on a curved scud hook. However, please tie quite a few on some straight hooks as well. I believe when the scud are swimming, they swim and their body's actually straightened out. Thus, it's probably a good idea to have some of those in your box. The other thing that I've noticed is that in the vast majority of times, I fish the scuds on the bottom, and that's when I catch fish. Now, there's a few major colors that you want to have in your fly box of these scuds. I'll be tying an olive today, which is a wonderful color. Tan is also excellent, possibly number one. And then finally, gray. If you have those three colors in your fly boxes, you're going to be fine when you hit those spring creeks. Now, I noticed that a lot of fly tyers also have a couple other colors that are out there, such as pink and orange. What I've learned from this article by Matt Wagner, and in fact, I'll put it in the description down below. I'll put a link in the actual YouTube comments, or the description of this video, so you can read it as well. But what Matt went on to say is that whenever you have pink in the scud, that represents a mating scud. And whenever you have orange, that's more than likely a dead scud. But for some reason, whenever I see some of these fly tying patterns of fellow tyers, it's like hot pink, bright orange, and I really want to stress that if you have those colors in your scud, it's probably not representational of the natural. It's more than likely acting as a hot spot. Matt went on to say in his article that those hues that you want to have should be softer, they should be lighter shades of that pink and orange integrated in with the rest of the body. Well, to talk about the pattern I'm going to tie today, this is just a really nice, basic, down and dirty scud nymph. I am going to add some burnt monofilament eyes. Is it essential? No. Do I like to have them in my patterns? Absolutely, and if you haven't tied them before, I definitely recommend you trying to burn some of these monofilament eyes and place them in the scud patterns because they look cool, they represent the natural, and maybe you can brag a little bit to your fellow tyers. I'll be tying this pattern today in olive, which is without a doubt one of my go-to colors and one that I really believe in. It's going to be heavily weighted, and you'll notice that right away, but I really like to fish this pattern on the bottom, and I'll fish it a lot in that, almost that Czech or Euro nymphing style where it will be that point fly, and I'll tie a smaller fly off the bend of the hook, about anywhere between 6 and 10 inches, somewhere around that length of 5X fluorocarbon. So that's just a little bit of background regarding the scud nymph, but if you are fishing spring creeks at all, or if you have any desire to, make sure you have a bunch of these in your box because though the majority of us love to fish dry flies, those scuds, they're an excellent nymph to catch a lot of fish on. So what I'm going to do now is show you a picture of the finished scud. I'm going to go over the tying instructions, in fact not the tying instructions, but all the materials for you, and then I'll finish up with the actual tips and techniques for tying this scud nymph. Alright, the first thing I want to do is show you how to burn some monofilament eyes. I have some old 4X Cortland Fairplay that I really just tend to leave lying around my fly tying bench. I picked up a bunch of these I don't know how long ago. I really never used them, so I thought this is great for integrating some of these into some of my flies. I really will encourage you to check out some other sizes, some other brands. There's different shades, and that can really alter the final result of your eyes. But for my purposes, this 4X works fine. I'm going to cut about 2 inches of it. And then I'm going to place it between a very thin pair of pliers. The thin pair is very crucial because the piece that I'm holding on to right now, the section that I'm holding on to of this monofilament, that's the part that's going to be tied onto my hook. And if I have a really wide piece of metal, the eyes aren't going to burn close to them. Thus, it's going to look a little funny and it's going to be difficult to tie on my hook because it's going to be such a large gap. In this case, these pliers work really well. I might grab a heat source make sure there's nothing combustible around my, my fly tying area. And I'm basically just going to light one end and chase it until it gets to the metal. Okay, once I have that end, I have a very nice ball there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And there we go. I have a perfect set of eyes, a nice dark color. And I'm just going to set these down on my vise, put a hook in, and then start tying this scud pattern. Okay, now that we have our eyes burnt, I have a hook in the vise and we're going to start tying the Scud Nymph. The hook is an Allen Fly Fishing N205 BL. It's a caddis pupa and larva hook. The BL stands for barbless. I tie this pattern anywhere between sizes 12 the whole way down to size 22. Whenever we look at this hook, it's got a really sweet look to it, a nice bend, a very perfect up eye, and there's also a bend that's actually moving towards the camera, as you can see if I adjust the vise a little bit in that direction. Onto that hook, I've already placed about 10 or 11 wraps of 010 lead wire to give it a little bit of weight. And I'm actually going to take this lead wire, just kind of push it out of the way for now. Next, I'm going to bring up some 8/0 olive thread. Just insert a little base. Bring that back forward, and the first thing I'm going to do is tie in my eyes. Now, if you're not used to tying these in, don't stress. They're tough to get a hold of. The first couple times you tie them in, they can be a little tricky, but for the most part, you just want to wrap them in, just like you're wrapping any other material in. Get a couple wraps over them. Make sure they're even. I really try not to put my wraps too tight whenever I'm first tying them in. I just want to make sure that I have them lined up, that they're straight. Once they're straight, I'm actually just going to place some figure 8s around the hook. And that's it for the eyes. The next thing I'm going to do is tie in the appendages or the antenna. For that I'm going to be using some squirrel tail, actually some fox squirrel tail. We don't have to tie in a bunch of these. I grab about a clump of a dozen or so. Just cut them out. With that clump, just going to swish it, get that out of there. Grab my Stonfo stacker, place it in. And before I bring these up, what I want to mention is that I'm going to be placing these antennas so they're actually going over the eye of the hook. That's not always ideal because sometimes if you get them too close to that eye, whenever you go to put your tippet in, you have some major problems. Some other tyers will actually place the eyes and those antennae out the back, and that's not a bad idea because then you don't have to worry about anything interfering with your tippet. It's also nice because this could represent that scud that's just kind of curled up, drifting in the current. Thus, it doesn't have to be drifting forward. However, I really prefer to have my scud with this look with the eyes in the front, so I'm going to tie mine accordingly. I'm going to line these up. I want them to be approximately just a hair shorter than the length of the body. I'm just going to put one wrap over, a very loose wrap, and then I'm actually going to firm it up as I tie back. So the further I may go, wrap forward a couple times, I just trim the butt ends out of there. Next, what I'm actually going to do is pull these up just a little bit, almost compare-it-on style, nowhere near that 90 degree, but I really just want to make sure they're up and kind of out of the way of that hook eye. Just a couple wraps, and that's all I need. Next time I bring this lead wire, it's going to be tough to get it over all those, the butt ends of that squirrel tail, and that's okay. You just want to make sure you have some wire in there. That piece got a little funky. Go over this a couple times. Then I next add in my ribbing. My ribbing is going to be none other than that 4X tippet that I originally started with for the eyes. I prefer 4X because it makes it look a little bit substantial. It's more than enough to separate those materials. I'm actually going to tie this in as well, just about halfway down that hook shank. Build it up, come back to the middle, and next I'm going to tie in my scud back. Alright, for the scud back part of this fly, please don't overthink this. If you want to go out and buy some scud back material, you definitely can. Otherwise, look around your house, find a plastic baggie, and just cut it apart. I prefer that this is clear, thus it will take on the color of the body, that olive in this case. I'll just have a bunch of these pre-cut. I don't tie that many dozen of these patterns every year, so I just will cut them as needed, tie up a couple dozen of this pattern, and move on. Whenever I trim these pieces of plastic, the most common question I get is, what should the width of them be? And with your lead wire, I wanted a little bit more than 2.5 times the length, or I'm sorry, the width of that lead wire. That should be the width of my scud back. So again, just kind of put it up next to your lead wire. Think about 2.5, no more than 3 times the width of that lead wire. I'm going to tie it in pretty high up. And the one thing I really want to ensure, just kind of caution all of you about, is that whenever you tie this in, you really want to make sure that it's straight and it's lined up evenly going back. That will save you really just a lot of trouble later on in this fly. I tie this down just like I tied in my my ribbing. And once I get about halfway down the shank of that hook, it's next time to dub my thread. The dubbing that I'm going to use is SLF spiky dubbing. This is squirrel dubbing. What's really nice about this is that there's a little bit of shine in there, and there's a lot of guard hairs, which we want to represent the legs of this scud. The color I'm using is brown olive, but this brand tends to have a lot more olive than it does brown in. I'm going to pull out a really healthy chunk of this. Whenever I dub it on, I'm going to dub it on very loose. I don't want that tight dubbing. If I want to use a dubbing loop, I can use that, but I really tend to not overthink this fly. Just gonna, as you see, just kind of dub it on. Don't worry about getting that real tight noodle. We're not tying dry flies here. Gonna taper it a little bit and put a little bit more further down this thread. If it looks built up, that's not a bad thing. All right, once I have it up to the eyes, I'm going to take a little piece of Velcro. I'm just going to pull some of the material out from the top, pull it out to the side. I want some of those longer guard hairs out because then I'll be able to pull them down later on. I don't want a lot, but just a few for now. I'm going to bring my scud backing material over the top. Again, I want to make sure it's as even as possible. If you tend to have it drag on one side or the other, that's not going to necessarily hurt the fly. You'll just have to make up for it with your ribbing. Okay, once I have that lined up where I want it, I'm just going to place a couple of wraps on it, one behind it, and that's it. I can kind of afford to leave that loose because I have this ribbing. All right, finally I'm going to rib this. I actually want to get a nice grip on this ribbing, so I might just grab a little pair of Stonfo hackle pliers. I use these for ribbing on a lot of different materials. I'm going to really be applying a lot of pressure to this and make sure all of my wraps are even. Whenever I'm doing that, I'm going to first look at my plastic on top. Mine's pretty straight, but if yours tends to be leaning one way or the other, then wrap in that opposite direction with your ribbing to straighten everything. In this case, I don't have to worry too much about that. So I'm just going to start the ribbing. Once I get near the eyes, I know I'm nearly finished. I can get my tippet out of the way. All right, we're just about finished with this portion of the fly. Make sure everything's lined up. It really seems to be, so I'm just going to bring my thread underneath, lift everything out of the way, build up my head just a hair, put in a half hitch, make sure I can still access that hook eye for my tippet, which I can. Then I'm going to apply a half hitch. Apply my whip finish. Okay, stage one is complete with this fly, but we still have a few more things to do. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is really focus on another important aspect of the scud, and that's their legs. In order to bring them out, you have a couple different options. You can use a good old needle and just pick them out that way, which is pretty easy, though I tend to go with the Velcro approach. I really like to get up there with this Velcro and really just pull all those guard hairs out. If I have any clumps of dubbing, I can then kind of take care of it accordingly. I don't want it clumped up too much. I really just want this representational of the legs. And this Velcro seems to do a really excellent job of that. So after those legs picked out, I'm just going to pull out some of those fibers with my fingers so they're not exceedingly long. And now this is starting to really look like that crustacean, that shrimp, that scud. Now there is one final piece that I'm going to add to mine that will just kind of separate this yet again. And it's because I really want that scud look, that crustacean look on the top. So I'm going to grab a little bit of UV clear fly finish. This is the fin. Place it on my needle. Just apply 2 layers on the back. And that's going to just harden it up a little bit, but also just really give it that scud look. I'm going to put this on my needle just so I don't go crazy with this stuff. Be careful, really make sure you leave it on the plastic. If it goes into that dubbing, it will absorb quite quickly. Just one small layer. I'm just going to hit it for about 15 seconds. And there's a better layer. And once I have this sit for a few more seconds, I will then have my finished Olive Scud Nymph. It's got lots of legs, very buggy, and just has an awesome look the whole way around. I'll show you a finished look at this pattern. I can see it looks like I had a couple fibers sticking out. I get those out of there. I don't want that glue sitting on all those fibers up there. There we go. So here's a finished look at this Olive Scud the whole way around. A lot of key points to this. You can see that ribbing really will show through. Those legs coming out, you can see how they're separated by that ribbing. We have that really great scud back. We have our antenna shooting out the front, so it's really obvious to the fish that this does represent that scud. And then finally we have one of my favorite parts, the burnt monofilament eyes. I'll even take some Sharpies or a Sharpie every now and then and just dab the outsides if I want to darken them at all, if they just don't appear to be that really dark eye color that I want from the scud. In this case though, they look really well to me. They look perfect, and I'm going to leave them the way they are. Well, I hope all of you enjoyed this YouTube fly tying tutorial of the Olive Scud Nymph. Special thanks go out to Allen Fly Fishing for the use of their N205 BL caddis pupa and larva hook. You can check out that hook and many more at allenflyfishing.com. And again, thanks to all of you for all of the views on my YouTube channel. If you have any questions or comments regarding this pattern, please feel free to leave them on this YouTube page in the comments section. Or as always, you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thanks everybody again for viewing the YouTube fly tying tutorial of the Olive Scud Nymph.